And when I read the short story, I saw an opportunity to kind of sort of bridge my worlds a bit, you know? Like it starts out with sort of the trappings of a horror film, and then it pivots pretty sharply into more of a family adventure film.
I'm Kevin. Whoa, that's so trippy. Can you talk? What happened to you? You don't remember?
Mystery.
I was a big fan of both Freaky and of the Happy Death Day to You movies, but this is kind of a departure for you, because I would say it's still funny, but it's a bit more outside of the horror genre. I read things comparing it to kind of Amblin movies, and I agree, and I just wondered if you could talk a little bit about swapping genres for this one.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think I've always had a movie like this in me. And when I read the short story, I saw an opportunity to kind of sort of bridge my worlds a bit, you know? Like it starts out with sort of the trappings of a horror film, and then it pivots pretty sharply into more of a family adventure film. And I grew up on Amblin, you know, a steady diet of it, among many other kinds of things. And so for me, this was sort of like an opportunity to bring all my babies together, you know, under one roof and say, okay, this. It really kind of feels like this is my personality on display, and my love for movies.
It reminded me a bit of this one that I loved back in the 80s, Harry and the Hendersons, a little bit.
Totally, 100%. Yeah, I mean, there's pieces of so many different kinds of movies. Harry and the Hendersons, The Frighteners, Gremlins, you know, like they really are like, it's like a big love letter to my childhood.
So bringing in a guy like David Harbour reminded me a little bit kind of like what you did with Vince Vaughn in Freaky, where these two kind of macho, iconoclastic kind of guys that really get to stretch and do something completely unexpected from them. And with Harbour, you know, not being able to speak at all in this one and having that terrible comb over, I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about deconstructing his screen persona a bit.
Yeah, you know, I think it's funny because David is such a respected actor. He's so beloved. And I think obviously so many people know him from Stranger Things. He reminds me in many ways of, like, I think of the movie Young Frankenstein, you know, like there's that you know, the physicality, the expression, the sort of like, and knowing that David is so good at being able to, he has his emotions at the ready, you know, and they are always on his face. And so it was such a perfect fit to me, you know, and he was up for the challenge, you know. Our first meeting together, he told me how scary he thought this role was, but that it was a challenge that he was excited by. And for me, I love to work with actors that are unafraid, you know, that want to dive into the deep end of the pool with you and just go for it. And that's who David is.
It's funny you said that. He definitely does remind me a bit of Peter Boyle and Young Frankenstein.
He really does.
Especially the eyes, the vulnerability in the eyes. Well, I like the young cast a lot. I thought that Jahi is his name, right? Jahi. I thought he was fantastic in the role, and he conveys such a sense of empathy for a young actor, which I thought was wonderful for the movie.
Yeah, I was on the hunt, as I've described it, for a unicorn. You know, I needed someone that was an old soul that had a wisdom and a depth, you know, and it's really rare. It's really hard to find. And I saw Jahi in a movie called Charm City Kings, and I literally saw it on an airplane. Like,
saw it in Sundance. Very good movie.
Yeah, and I was blown away by his performance. And I just kind of, as soon as I landed, I called the studio and I was like, we have to build the movie around this kid. He's too good.
Can you talk a little bit also about, you know, working for Netflix as opposed to Blumhouse? Was there, because I would assume that the budget was significantly higher with this than you're used to working with, right?
Yeah, it was definitely a much, much bigger budget. You know, I'm so grateful to Netflix because even though I was working in a much bigger sandbox, so to speak, there was so much creative support, you know, and that's what it felt like the whole way through. It wasn't like we're gonna grind you down and try and take things away from you. It was more like, how can we support you? How can we help you realize your vision of the film? And that was every step of the way. So I really do feel like I got to make the movie that I really wanted to make.
Well, I mean, it feels to me that Netflix is one of the few places that you can go to make an original movie that's not necessarily going to be done at a micro budget level. Like, I don't know if there's a micro budget version of this movie that could have been done. I know with Blumhouse, it's always, they keep the budgets really low, right? But Netflix, there's a little bit more wiggle room. Do you find that mainstream studios just are not greenlighting movies like this anymore? Like, I mean, even though it's a very commercial film, it seems that they're only actually putting serious money into franchise stuff, right? No original projects.
I mean, I am 100% confident that I would not have gotten this movie made anywhere else.
Yeah.
And I think that they are open to some risks. I also think that they recognize that there's a gap, that there's sort of like this kind of this mid-level movie that used to get made a long time ago that is really hard to make now. And you look back at some movies and you think about The Goonies and you think about, E.T. and you wonder, like, how would those movies get made now and where would they get made, And it really does feel like it would be Netflix.
Yeah, no doubt. Also, it's kind of interesting the use of Anthony Mackie in it, because I think we're used to seeing him in Marvel and as this kind of man of action type role, but it was nice to see him stretch a little bit and play, the father figure. I think eventually he becomes very sympathetic, but at the beginning they do start the movie off where he's a little bit, not necessarily a bully, but he's out for himself and he doesn't really necessarily think of his family. He's thinking of, the fame and the success that can come with, exploiting Ernest.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. In the short story, the Frank character, he's sort of an unapologetic jerk and not redeemable, like he never really turns a corner. And I really wanted the Frank character to have his own arc. And also to keep Frank from becoming totally unlikable, I needed Anthony Mackie. Because Anthony is the most charming, outgoing, kind person I know, and I knew he would bring that to the role. And so that even when he's being very manipulative, and that's really what Frank is. It's not that he's a bad guy, he's just a manipulative guy. And he's trying to take a shortcut, like he wants to provide for his family. He wants to be this great father, but he wants to do it the easy way and the quick way and not the real way. And so I thought Anthony really understood the role and, brought so much to it. And he's super funny, like he's great.
Well, speaking of funny too, you guys kind of lucked out with Jennifer Coolidge, I think, too. When you filmed the movie, was it after she'd done White Lotus season 1, or was it just before?
So it was after season 1.
Yeah.
And I mean, look, I'm a longtime fan of hers. And I was ecstatic that she was willing to do it. When I met with her, she immediately said, "Oh, this character, she's a phony, and I love to play phonies." And so I thought that was so cool that she's so aware. And she's really different, I think, in a lot of ways from her sort of on-screen persona. She's like really sharp, really focused, comes to work, does the work, but is also just a really fun person to hang out with.
I do have to ask you the inevitable Happy Death Day to You trilogy ending question. Is there a chance that we'll ever get another one? Because I think a lot of people are kind of hoping that maybe one day.
I mean, there's only two chances. It's either Universal decides that they want to make it, because I'm ready, or I, win Powerball and have just shitloads of money and I can just finance it myself.
Because I mean, we love and Freaky as well. Like, I was always one of those fans that felt that Freaky and Happy Death Day 2 took place in the same world. Do they?
A lot of people talk about that. A lot of people feel it. I mean, I think they share a lot of DNA, and so I think that there is even a world where those two could meet, but I don't have that idea yet.
One last question. When you're making a movie for Netflix, do you still have the same struggles with the MPAA that another movie would have? Because one of the things I noticed about the movie was you have that great gore effect when when the face kind of melts, right?
Yeah.
That whole scene. And I was wondering, that reminded me a bit of Raiders of the Lost Ark. Did you?
That's what I called it. That was our reference when we were doing it. I was like, I want to do the Raiders.
Even though it was for comic effect, is it something you had to struggle to put through, or is there a little more leeway when it's?
There's a lot more leeway, Okay. I think that we have a lot more latitude and flexibility there. Just because you don't have to, we're not beholden to a rating per se, but maybe we still have to show it, and the film still got rated.
Sure.
But I always kind of knew that it was sitting comfortably between PG and PG-13 anyway.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the movie. Thanks for your time.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Frank, is he here now?
Ready to have some fun?